Not for nothing, name of the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Erik Honda, and full disclosure for anybody in here, one of my best friends. Yeah.
Thank you.
But that's not why you're here. You're a real smart guy. I'm interested, as always, the amount of time that we spend on the phone like 15-year-old girls is embarrassing.
Some will say it's embarrassing. I think it's okay.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Could, for the audience, you just give a brief intro, who you are, where you're from?
Yeah. Quick disclaimer. All my opinions are my opinions, not the opinions of a certain department I may work for or city I may work for. So just throw that out there at the beginning.
We got that? That's out at the beginning?
All right.
Not
just my stuff.
Not reflective of any department he may work for.
Yep.
All right. Go ahead.
Born and raised in Seattle, or right outside Seattle. Lived out there for 19 years before I came to Iowa. Family's still all out there, besides my sister. She's kind of moves around with her husband, but mom and dad, brother and sister, and grandma still all out in Seattle area. Came to Iowa 22 years ago now. So I've been out in Iowa for the last 22 years and came out here for school.
So what year?
2002.
Okay, that's funny because that's about how long I've been in Iowa.
So 2002 in August I moved out to Iowa, and I've lived out in Iowa pretty much the entire time since then. I've even in like the summers in school, I stayed out here, or I would work somewhere out here and just go home for like a week or two. But I've pretty much been out in Iowa since 2002. So I think since I'm pretty sure I'm now an Iowan-ish. Kind of.
I don't know. I hate to get racial this early.
It's okay.
In the cast, but not a whole lot of.
No, that's fine. I bring that 0.0% to Iowa.
Yeah, you're not kidding. The irony to me is always that you are the whitest person that I know. In most things, you enjoy coffee.
I do.
Trying to think what else. Yeah.
I would say yes and no. There's certain things that I'm still pretty Asian in, but I'd say I do have my flavor of whiteness, quote unquote. I think part of that is my mom, growing up in a biracial household. My mom's obviously white. My dad's Japanese.
It's not obvious.
No, it is.
I'm just putting it out there.
But we did do a lot of stuff with like Japanese culture and Asian culture growing up, but not, I would say, as much probably if it would have been like a completely Japanese culture. And I think that is good, and I think that's good. I mean, it allows me to pass on traditions, some Japanese traditions or some Asian traditions still to my family and my kids and stuff.
You guys do a lot of math at your house?
So I definitely did not get that. I guess my father is your stereotypical Asian male. He got a double degree from the University of Washington in 3 years.
When he was 14.
In like math and electrical engineering.
Okay.
So he is legitimately the smartest human being I've ever known in my life.
Okay.
Like he is a very, very, very smart human being.
Well, to be fair, you got some of that.
I did not get that, definitely.
Not the math.
No, I definitely struggled with the math and that stuff. I believe that got passed on. Like Tatum, my son, is very smart when it comes to math, and it's hard, even to the point where I try to help him. I'm like, just call your grandpa. He can explain it better than I can explain
That's
it.
Funny.
But I think my ability to look and analyze and understand like combat sports is like that math gene that may have gone missing, and because I have a very unique ability to watch pretty much any combat sports and be able to understand how combat sports happen, and the different angles and the different perspectives and techniques, and be able to break down technique. And
particularly grappling sports.
Yes.
Wrestling,
Yes.
jiu-jitsu,
Yep.
judo, right?
Yeah, just because I've been involved in the wrestling community for 30 years, and I did judo for a little bit, and I've been doing jiu-jitsu now for 4.5, 5 years, and it's being able, grappling's grappling. Just because one rule says this, one rule says that, it's all essentially the same thing. Just the rules dictate what you're going to do or what your ultimate goal is. And being able to understand how the body moves, and how you can use different angles and different forms of physics to get to the point you want, like, that's what I enjoy, and I like breaking that stuff down. But I came out here for sports. I came out here to college for wrestling.
Where?
University of Dubuque.
Okay.
I would say I was the most okay/not okay person on the team. Definitely did not have the college career that I thought I was going to have. I got injured in college for a little bit. I had to sit out a year with injury. Looking back on it, I probably was not mentally ready or physically ready for what I thought college was, and college wrestling was, and definitely the meat grinder that the old Iowa Conference used to be, and still kind of is, taught me a lot of lessons in life. So that kind of helped me moving forward. I like to think that failure is my biggest teacher, is my best teacher. I've had 1,000 failures and very few successes, but I think my successes are all based off my failures, and being able to learn and improve off of failures, and understand what that failure means. And it's not a true failure unless you let it be a true failure and you don't learn from it. Growing up, that was kind of like, hey, always do your best, always do your best, always do your best. And just understanding that, and then taking that perspective now, and being able to learn from those mistakes or failures that I've had, to just kind of guide me to where I have been, or who I am now, and where I want to go in the future.
Yeah, I think the willingness to fail is something that has fallen out of favor.
Yes.
From a social perspective, I think there's much more a tendency now for people to not try something that they think they might fail at. Mm-hmm. Because if you don't try, you can't fail.
And I think the definition of winning is one thing too that definitely has been warped or skewed over the last handful of years. To most people, winning means either getting your hand raised, or being number one, or being at the top. But you can be winning by hey, my certain goal was this, and I reached that goal.
So you're framing winning within the context of personal best.
Yes.
In anything.
In anything.
Right? If I come in last
Yep.
in the race, and that's the best time I've ever run, I won.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because you've now improved yourself. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, yes, true. In a sports mindset, we would like to, quote unquote, win, be number one. But you don't get there unless you have a lot of those mini wins along the way. Mm-hmm. And you're not going to have many wins where you're number one along the way. You're going to have many wins where you're number 10, number 5, number 10, number 2.
Which, that's not a win. Well,
but it is a win, because
yeah.
if you're improving along the way, you're getting to that point. And one thing I like talking, I do a lot of coaching. One thing I like to talk to my athletes is, what is a win? Let's redefine the term win. I coach wrestling, so did you get a takedown in this match? Did you get 2? Did you not get ridden out? Did you get out? I don't care at the end of the day if you got your hand raised. I care if your goal was to get 2 takedowns this match and you got 2 takedowns. Perfect.
Especially if you got none last match.
Yeah, we reached our goal, because you know what? Ultimately, at the end of the run, what is our true goal? If our true goal is, when we're in high school, or we want to reach a certain point, this is just another piece of data along the way, and let's hit those data points, and let's keep moving, and let's improve. And that's, to me, that's like how I approach a lot of my stuff, especially like my jiu-jitsu or something along the lines, is like, okay, where am I improving? How am I need to improve? One thing we've talked about a lot is, like going into a practice or a role. What's your goal for the role? Is my goal to come out and get a win? Or is my goal like, hey, I've been working on this half guard sweep, okay? So pass my guard so I can work on my half guard sweep. I don't care if you get me in 20 submissions that day if I'm working on my half guard sweep.
Yeah, particularly in practice, nothing frustrates me more than people approaching it with the mindset of winning.
Yes.
What are you winning? You know what I mean? And yeah, you might win, particularly somebody athletic or big or strong or skilled or all of those things. But what did you work on? What did you get better at? And yeah, I do the same thing. I mean, and I'm not really any of those things. But yeah, I will approach a practice with, you know what? I'm going to look at a particular sweep, and I may get shit hammered the entire practice, but if I got that, particularly on a good opponent, that's a win.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's part of development. I think, again, redefining winning and understanding development should be the goal. I want to develop myself into a better athlete. I want to develop myself into a better person. I want to develop myself, and like my big thing is taking those things that we can learn in sports. Sports is, in my opinion, is one of the best ways to teach kids and people throughout across life. But it's easy to take a skill or to take a mindset in sports because you have a goal, and it's a very simple goal. I want to get number one. I want to get, I want to qualify for this. I want to be able to do this. So it's easy to take those aspects of sports, and develop them through those aspects of sports, but then trying to bridge that to school, trying to bridge that to your personal life, and helping kids understand, or helping people understand that you can bridge that. And just because you have this skill set on a mat, on a field, on a court, let's bridge that across. Let's use those skill sets we learn in sports to become a better human being.
And by skill set, you're talking about, correct me if I'm wrong, mindset.
Mindset, absolutely.
My ability to shoot a dub doesn't help me in an office setting. However, the fact that I will regularly run up against failure in the wrestling room or on the jiu-jitsu mat translates into not, running into that same failure in any other. It's something that I preach to people, it's funny, they say it in Fight Club, the volume on your life gets turned down once you start fighting, and it's true, because your boss being an asshole or not granting whatever, or something not going right in a meeting pales in comparison to your knee on my neck for 15 minutes in the course of a practice. So I guess for me, or combat sports in particular, have always provided perspective.
Yeah. And I think it's one of those things that it gets kind of lost especially with people like it takes someone to help them understand that you can transition the mindset from sports or from combat sports to your personal life, and helping them make the connection. A big one that I've been working a lot with kids lately is weightlifting, being able to translate self-confidence by, hey, I just gave you a bar and you picked the bar up. You didn't know you could pick that bar up. You thought you could, so now you have that confidence. Okay, cool. Now you have a little bit of self-confidence. Now let's put that in perspective of being on a mat, or being at school, or personal, in your personal life. Let's take that confidence now and let's move that across other places. And I think being able to use those little things to build the big things. One of my favorite sayings, and if you ask my son, I say this way too much, is little things equal big things. And I tell that to all my kids. Hey, do the little things right, because they will equal the big things. I clearly stole that off of someone that's much smarter than me.
I don't think anybody that's had any success in almost any arena, and again, if we're talking specifically sports, would disagree with you. It's funny because I say something very similar for it's about fundamentals. Yeah. It's the little stuff. The best boxers in the world do the really simple. Jiu-jitsu's an even better one. You know what I mean? A black belt is somebody that simply does that same exact mounted arm bar. He just does it tighter, cleaner, more refined, and that's from practice and repetition. I had a couple things. So
let's go crazy.
I'd like you to briefly let our audience know how we met and became friends.
So
because, and I just want to preface real quick, if you had told me 5 years ago that my best friend was a cop, hey, I would have told you were crazy. But that's where we're at. Yeah. So
I kind of went through a renaissance, as I call it, in my life, about 5-6 years ago ish or so, sometime for that time frame, where I really had time to kind of sit down, look at myself. I had gone through some struggles going on, personal and family and stuff like that, and work, and I really had time to sit down and look at myself and ask the hard questions. Instead of blaming, and keeping down the same track, what is truly happening and why is this stuff truly happening? And being able to digest that and saying, yes, this is because the choice you made, and now you have to eat that consequence. Okay, well, where are we going to get better? How are we going to improve? What are we going to learn from this to make ourselves better? And one of my big things that, along with, I got an actual doctor, because I didn't have a doctor at that point. I would always, if I got sick, be like, hey, let's go to the convenient care clinic, and I figured, well, I'm like 35, 36 years old. I probably should get a doctor. That's kind of the responsible human thing to do. So then I started going to the doctor and being like, okay, I want to get my blood checked. I want to get everything checked. I want to see, because I want to be able to be there when my kids are 15, 20, 30, 40, when they have kids. I want to be able to do stuff with their kids, and maybe if I can live to that far, their grandkids, like that would be cool. And one of the aspects is I wanted to start doing jujitsu. I had listened to a lot of podcasts, and people talking about jujitsu, the Joe Rogans, Andy Stumps, those guys got into jujitsu, and I had always had a combat sports background, and I knew that
being wrestling and judo,
and judo, and it was like, okay, well, I felt comfortable controlling people, but I knew that there was a different way. And one of my friends' wives was actually going to hard drive at the time. So she had shared a video that Keone had posted, and this is kind of around the George Floyd stuff going on up in Minnesota.
2020.
Yeah. And Keone had posted a video about, officers coming in and training, and I was like, that was kind of my big thing. I was like, okay, nope, I'm gonna go start making the push. And I had emailed Keone and I said, hey, I want to come down and check it out and try and train. And you happen to be the coach of the noon class, which just happened to fit in my schedule. So I came down, I met you, and I think it was, we think a lot alike on many things, and our personalities are very similar, I would say, and we were able to mesh right away. And I think that pretty much from that day on, it was like, okay, this guy's okay.
Yeah, he's all right.
Even though he's from New Jersey, he's okay.
We're going to get to that.
Okay, because we got to get to that.
For any other officer that's watching or is going to watch this, do you have excuse me, a time while you're on duty that you have used jiu-jitsu?
Yep.
And are you able to point to times where using jiu-jitsu was infinitely easier than what you had either used before or had been taught earlier?
Definitely. And I know kind of with when I went through the academy years ago, there was some training with the ground and grappling techniques, but not as much as they're doing now. I know a lot in law enforcement has changed, and the emphasis of being able to control a human being or another person, especially on the ground, or getting them to the ground, has changed, and it's definitely going towards more of the jiu-jitsu, wrestling, control aspects. There's been lots of times that I've used control techniques of being able to control another human being. The one aspect that I always tell people is it's not just learning how to control another person, but it's learning how to control yourself. And
that harkens back to what we were talking about.
And when you do jiu-jitsu, one of the big things that everyone struggles with, is learning patience, learning how to control your breathing.
I was just going to say
learning how to understand the situations that are going on, because everything is in the micro. So I'm, if I move my elbow this, just a little bit, I can get to a new wedge or a new frame, and then I can start working my way out. Or if I'm on top or in a submission, I just move just a little bit and I can get to that submission. And when you work in the micro, if your brain is not working in the micro too and actively thinking, everything goes awry. And there's a lot of guys that will wrestle themselves or grapple themselves out of a good position to a bad position.
Yeah, it's my favorite thing to say about new people, particularly
Yes.
like people who have wrestled. You just can't wait to wrestle your way out of a good spot.
Yep.
Relax.
Yep.
Yeah.
And just learning how to think in bad positions. Someone's on your back, they're going after your neck. Being able to be calm in that position and understand, hey, when I need to do big explosive moves, I need to do big explosive moves. But I can be calm and I can work my way out of a bad position. That mindset and learning that day in and day out, has translated more to my job than anything, than any control position. Because it's being calm in a stressful situation. Being able to rationally think in a stressful situation. Being able to understand and process and go, okay, here's an option, here's an option, here's an option. Okay, how can I get to this best option from what I got right now?
I'd like to know if you agree, but two things. That's a learned behavior.
Yes.
One of the things that I say has been my experience, and not just mine, but I think is really important. People often think that if they train and something happens, they're going to swing into some incredible. You don't rise to the occasion, you sink to the level of your training.
Yes, and I truly believe in that too. I believe you'll always fall back to your lowest level of training. And what I tell people all the time is if you're not doing something where you're actually physically trying to move another human being, I don't care if it's jiu-jitsu, if it's wrestling, judo, I mean, even some of the other combats, martial arts, where you're actually physically trying to impose something on a human being on a regular basis, then you're probably not doing it right. Because you need to understand that if I want to do something to you that you are not wanting to do, I need to understand how that feels.
And then when presented with the situation that requires that skill, you're not just going to get it.
Yeah.
And I've always been frustrated by, and I know many officers as well, with the once or twice a year training.
Well,
because what's yes. not going to happen is you're not going to end up in a situation and instantly all of a sudden be like, well, at that seminar 6 months ago, what we did, you're not. You're going to react. You're going to sink to your lowest level of training.
And in reality, most departments, that's, if you get it once a year, you're lucky. If you get it twice a year, you're good. My department, we do a good job about getting a decent amount of training in. My boss is really good about it.
How much of that is your insistence or recommendation? Or...
He's always been good about it. He's always been really good about it. I think
That's what I'd say if I was.
Yeah. No, he's really good about getting us the training that we need, and I would say that we get a good amount of training in compared to other departments that I know of. I know of some departments that get 0 hours of training, and there's certain things that are mandated that we train in, and there's certain things that are not mandated that we train in, that it would blow your mind. Okay, why are you mandated to train in this, but you're not mandated to train in these other areas? And again, it's kind of it gets in the very political realm at that point.
I feel like firearms would be a good example.
Firearms is a mandated training.
The number of officers that pull their gun in a line of duty is almost non-existent.
It's a very low amount. And granted, yes, you want to be proficient in that, but having any hands-on situation as a mandated training, it's not mandated training.
But that's something 100% of officers will go hands-on with a suspect, right?
Absolutely. At some point in their career, at some point in the time, you're going to use defensive tactics. Either it's your presence, your soft hands, hard hands. Every time you pull out handcuffs, that's a defensive tactic, you know, by definition.
Yeah.
You know, being able to understand, again, even just being able to talk to people and know presence, position, and placement when you talk to people. That's part of that whole defensive tactics realm too. And you know, the fact that some people aren't getting the training in it, you know, I can't speak for their departments, but you know, it would be something that I would be doing if I was in that department.
My issue has always been when the only tool you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Absolutely.
And when all you receive is firearms training, you know, you have the potential for that being the tool that you go to sooner than you might.
Well, and it's just the confidence within the tools or within your skill set too. If you're only getting training in one aspect, you're only going to have some level of confidence in that aspect. If I'm not getting any training and having to grab you and force you to do something or force to move you or to gain control of you, I don't have any confidence in that, you know? And to me, confidence is a big thing. If you don't believe in your own skill, then the likelihood of an accident or something bad happening is much higher.
Exponentially.
You know,
yeah.
Because now you get panicked, and when you get panicked, you're not thinking rationally.
Yep.
And when you don't think rationally, bad things happen. Yeah. What else did I have?
Okay, this is something I wanted to talk to you about that we actually haven't really discussed up to this point, but I'm sure you have an opinion.
But before we get into that,
Go ahead.
Go ahead. We have to at least talk about.
Is this Jersey?
The Jersey thing.
All right. For those of you that think that I'm from New Jersey, because this has been put out into the zeitgeist. Which one? Okay. This is why. It's unbelievable.
So, one day at practice, I thought it would be a great idea to convince people or to tell people that you were from New Jersey.
Why would you do that anyway? I'm just...
You know...
Just a cruel streak? You weren't hugged enough as a child?
No, I just think it's fun because you react to it so visceral.
That's fair.
You react to it so
That's fair.
viscerally that we would tell new people or we would tell people that you're from New Jersey. And eventually people were coming into the gym actually believing, because not only was it me, it was other guys at practice, started saying this. And it got to the point where people were coming in and we were like, oh yeah, he's from Jersey. And they're like, oh, really? You're from New Jersey? And then at that point, I knew we had created a monster and we needed to let the monster grow. So every opportunity I had, and I know other people were involved in this too.
Oh yeah, you're not alone.
But every opportunity we would say you're from Jersey. And I think the ultimate...
Here we go.
The ultimate, satisfaction of success of this little inside joke would be the podcast you went on. And you know more about that podcast, but just the fact that guy who has nothing to do with the gym or anything,
nothing. Yeah.
But he truly believed you were from New Jersey.
Yeah, he wore a New Jersey Devils hat.
Yes.
Yeah. To the podcast in an attempt to get on my good side, which is funny because as soon as I saw it, I was more or less, the fuck is that?
And he mentioned it. Saying something about, oh, I know you're from New Jersey.
Yeah.
And
and you were watching the podcast.
Yes. I was like, I want to know how he got to this information.
I have no idea
because that just makes me feel happy.
It's out there.
Yes, it's just out there.
Yeah.
So for everyone out there, Demian is actually from New Jersey?
No, born and raised in New York, actually. Yeah.
We'll let it continue to grow.
It's funny because I actually consider myself an Iowan. And I realized when that happened was when I would talk with somebody back home and they would disparage Iowa.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, whoa, you know what I mean? Like I've lived and worked in like 42 states. I picked Iowa. You know, I like Iowa. It's cheap, it's safe, it's quiet. At the time I stayed, you know, decided to stay, it was like the epicenter for mixed martial arts in this country. I've since met my wife, my best friend, my best friends. You know what I'm saying? Like I love Iowa.
And I think I second that. I think, you know, going home and seeing other places is definitely cool. But you know, I lived in a bigger city. You know, I lived in Dubuque for a while. Now I live outside Dubuque and Cascade, and
great little town.
And again, you know, I lived outside Seattle in a city of 100,000, and you know, essentially a metro of Seattle. You know, where you're just a number, and then going to a smaller city in Dubuque, and then now moving out to Cascade. I would rather even move even smaller out in the middle of the country. You know, and it's just. I enjoy being in kind of that small city.
Well, it's funny, for Cascade, you're right in the middle of town.
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
mean, yeah, it's a one stoplight town, I get it, but you are kind of right.
Yeah, but I mean, and it's just, you would think the opposite. You know, you grew up in a bigger area, you grew up in a bigger, it's just like the more I'm exposed to, you know, Midwest nice and Iowa culture, it's like, I enjoy it. I enjoy knowing my neighbors and talking with my neighbors, and they watch over my house, and you know, I enjoy being in a small little community where like the community knows my kids. It's like I tell my son all the time, like he goes out with his friends, like I'm probably going to hear about it before you tell me about it. So if you want to do something and that's probably not the best choice, you probably want to let me know, because I'm probably going to get 3 calls about it before you even tell me about it. And but it's nice. It's nice to have that community aspect. You know, growing up in a bigger city, we knew who our neighbors were, but we didn't know, you know, everyone, you live somewhere and you work an hour away, which is really like 20 miles away, but you have to drive an hour because of traffic.
God, I don't miss that shit.
You know, and it's like, it's cool being able to say, you know, I know my neighbors, I know the people down the street, I know, you know.
Yeah, not know of them.
Yes.
Like I know them.
Yes.
Yeah.
I actually have a relationship. I care about them, and I enjoy being around that in that small community.
And I actually enjoy, and as I'm sure you do, the perspective of having the experience of the bigger city.
Yes.
Like, guess what? When I hear people around here complain about 2 things, it makes me laugh: traffic, right? And the DMV, or the License Bureau, whatever they call it out here. Back home, it's the DMV.
Yep.
And I'm telling you, no matter what you want to do, it's 8 hours.
Oh yeah.
You're treated like an inmate.
Yep.
It's expensive. You know what I mean? Like I think the most I've waited at the License Bureau here is like an hour.
Yeah.
And that was because I decided on a Wednesday at noon when everybody else was, you know. So yeah, in addition to all the things that make smaller city or even small town life really nice, there's the juxtaposition of that against, you know, having worked, you know, lived at one point an hour outside of New York City, working in Queens, 5 hours of driving a day. And to your point, it's 40 miles.
Yeah, like, and it's funny, like talking with people back home, they're like, yeah, my commute is 2-hour commute, but I'm really driving like 35 miles. I'm like, dude, if I was doing a 2-hour commute, I'm going
to Des Moines,
or
I'm going Quad Cities,
you know,
or
like 100-something miles away, because I'm driving on a highway, and it's a true 2-hour commute, you know. And it's like, okay, yeah, like, well, I'll tell people all the time, like, you know, back home, like, yeah, we gotta drive like 30 minutes into town, or, you know, we gotta drive, you know, I drive 34, 40 minutes back down here, and it's like, oh yeah, and I'm like, no, but it's like 30 miles away.
Yep. Yep. I go up to my boy Dakota, lives up near you, and it's 35, 40 minutes to get up there, but it's 35, 40 minutes of zero traffic open highway.
Yep.
I can throw something on the radio. I can listen to a podcast.
Absolutely.
It's funny. So we're talking about not being in a city, and I've been doing quite a bit of listening to various podcasts as I get older, and as me and my wife are trying to have a kid. We're going the IVF route, a bunch of reasons, but I'm 48 years old, and you had talked earlier about like wanting to be there for, you know, I want to be like 70 years old. My kid graduates from high school, so health has become, you know, I've always been reasonably healthy. My mom raised me right. I had a combat sports career for a very long time that required a certain diet, exercise, but I've been looking more and more into things, and the more I look into it from sources that are not just big pharma or anybody that has a stake in this massive amount of money surrounding health, the more I find out that quite a bit of what we've been told is bullshit.
Yeah.
And what's the gentleman's name? I wrote it down. Gary Brecka.
I'm not familiar with him.
Incredibly interesting as it relates to, he used to work for insurance companies.
Okay.
And part of his job was looking at just case after case after case, and he noticed patterns. And then the patterns very much were, and it's funny, this made me feel smart. Doesn't happen a lot, so let me have this one. Where people would show up at the doctor's office with slightly high cholesterol, and they would get put on a medication. And that medication would cause another reaction that necessitated medication.
More medication.
And then the contra interactions between the two would cause another medication. And he said for certain combinations and interactions, he could time it out almost to the year.
Yeah.
Almost to the month when they would die. And the me feeling smart part is simply about a year or so ago, as you know, I quit drinking.
Nope. Congratulations.
Yeah, best decision I ever made. Shortly after quitting, though, I went to my doctor, and my doctor, I got blood work, and she was like, woo, all of this is bad. So what we're going to do is we're going to put you on, and she listed off like 4 medications, and I said, no, we're not.
Yeah.
What we're going to do is we're going to let me get all of this shit out of my system, let my liver recover, et cetera, et cetera. And I came back about a year later and full, 180 on all my numbers. And
I've had some experience with that too, and when I kind of started doing my little health journey, I got my blood work done, and then I go every year and I get my blood work done, with my primary doctor. And last couple years, all my numbers are improving. My good cholesterol is improving. My bad cholesterol is kind of lowering, staying the same, but lowering a little bit, not too much. But all my numbers are improving. And, I had a conversation with my primary doctor, and she's like, okay, this number, I forgot what number it was, but she was like, your numbers don't make sense. And she's like, if these numbers are going up like this, but this number should be going to a different point, and it's not, and it should be going up. I'm like, well, honestly, like I eat like 3 dozen eggs a week. Like I eat a lot of eggs.
Awesome.
I eat a lot of eggs. I eat a lot of rice. Some sort of meat, and I don't eat a ton of vegetables, but I eat a lot of eggs. I'm like, eggs are like the ultimate, in my opinion, like the ultimate superfood. And she's like, yeah, but your cholesterol is not showing it. And I'm like, and she's like, well, I'm supposed to tell you not to do that. And I'm like, well, who says that? Who is the they are supposed to tell you?
Yeah.
And she's like, well, that's the whatever, the common knowledge or the common viewpoint of that food. And I'm like, but my numbers don't show that though. My numbers show something else. And she's like, I know. She's like, keep doing what you're doing because it's obviously working. I'm like, yeah, I will. And
so much of those numbers were the more we study this from the vantage point of not a study funded by the pharmaceutical industry, the more we realize that some really simple shit. And I've been, I'm 48 years old. My numbers are perfect, and I've got really high miles. A lot of that, though, is because almost by accident, I've been doing a ton of the things. Most Americans, 65% of what they eat is highly processed food. And it's funny because we're talking about Japan. Hey, if you look at pockets in the world of people that are centenarians, people that are 100 or better, it's funny because what they don't share is necessarily the same diet, right? You get like the Okinawan diet, which is inarguably good. It's, very healthy greens, it's fish. But then you get like France and Italy that just throw a massive wrench into it because these guys are eating pasta and a ton of butter and they're drinking wine. The common factor is 2 things. It's that it's not refined food. Like, that's it. And the other real common, the highest concentration is a spot in Italy where to get anywhere, because it's in the mountains, you have to walk a 30-degree slope. Either up it or down it, you got to come back up it, you know. So just that simple amount of movement, coupled with not having a bunch of terrible, horrific ingredients in your food, it's kind of the recipe for longevity and health.
Well, and like I've talked to other people in the past about it, and they're like, when I try to explain like what my diet is or what I eat, I'm like, you know, it's very, very simple. Like I don't make it overcomplicated. I make it very simple. You know, if I'm going to work, I'll make 4 or 5 meals out of, you know, some eggs, some
like prep for the week.
Oh yeah, some eggs, maybe some bacon.
We do that,
and some rice, and then I'll put like salsa on it, and it's a ton of good, nutritious stuff. It's very, very basic, handful of ingredients, and that's it. You know, like even like, you know, my son's getting ready for, you know, postseason wrestling now. We got districts, and we're gonna have state hopefully, and it's like it's like, hey, we're gonna start doing some meal planning and prepping, and okay, we're gonna go basic. You know, it's either some chicken and rice or some ground beef and rice, and you know,
and obviously you're looking for
we're looking for performance. You know, we're looking
performance without gaining weight.
Yes, we're looking for performance. Like, what do you need to perform? If you want to be a Ferrari, you're not going to put regular unleaded gasoline in. You know,
that's funny. That's
you know, if you want to have good performance out of your body, you know, you need to put the right stuff into it. And I think the less ingredients you can put into something, the better it is.
Yeah, and turns out that's not an opinion.
No,
like and boy, man, real quick, shout out to Mama Josephine Papagni, my mom, because what amazes me, no internet, no real research, certainly not what was being taught or told. This is how I was fed my entire childhood up into adulthood, and because of that, that was my natural proclivity as it relates to diet.
Yeah,
I'm the luckiest human being on the planet.
Well, yeah, you know me.
Well, I mean, clear, but my point is I would love to see more of this information disseminated to the public.
Yeah, and I you know, and like my thing with being simple is it doesn't the more simple you make it, the less you have to think about it.
Yeah, and the easier it is.
And you know, the one
cheaper.
the one thing I always have people tell me is like, well, how does it taste? How does it taste? I'm like, well, that's why I use salsa. You know, chicken and rice isn't going to taste the greatest, but if I put some salsa on it, which is again very basic, simple ingredients, it's going to taste good.
And when it comes to,
you know, put like some hot sauce, like you know, put some you know, some sort of basic sauce on it. Yeah, you're going to make it taste good, and as long as you don't like drown it where it's like completely drenching off of it, but you make it taste good. Like you don't have to go super crazy and like. Yes, you can go to the nutritionist and do all the crazy stuff and measure out. But like my thing is like, hey, just make simple ingredients. Like ingredients should be like five or six ingredients. You know, and then you're good to go.
So if you want to experience some real exasperation and depression, walk around Hy-Vee and start. Like I make sourdough bread. One of the reasons I make sourdough bread is because you literally, in the bread aisle, can't get bread.
Yeah.
You know, that doesn't have a list of ingredients, and it's mind-blowing. And it's like that for so many things. Yeah, it's not, I wouldn't say it's hard, but it's generally not how people were raised.
Well, and
it's not necessarily the easy, you know, it's real easy to grab something, throw it in the microwave and make it.
100%. And again, the more you can, you know, for me, before I first started like meal prepping, before I would go to work, it was always like, we'd get to work and the immediate conversation was like, oh, where are we going to go eat? What are we going to eat? What are we going to eat? And then you're all talking about it and planning it out. And because, you know, if you work at nights, restaurants or places are only open for so long, you know, if you want to get something and then I want to eat it later, I got to go get it. I got to plan it out and do all this stuff. You know, so it occupied brain space, you know, where it occupies where if I prep and I just do, hey, boom, I'm done.
Isn't it great?
I don't even have to think about it.
Isn't it great? You have a meal pack.
Yeah,
we call them meal packs.
Yeah.
So, you know, we'll do a week, you know, 12 to 15, you know, meal packs. And And some nights we'll make something else.
Mm-hmm.
I would be curious. Hey, one of you guys get a minute. Can you look up how often the average person eats out? I think it's catastrophic.
Oh, it probably is.
Like, I work in a restaurant, and
I used to work in restaurants, and I mean, you would see the same people coming in and coming out.
Yeah.
And, it's, again, I just think the convenience factor there, it kind of depends on where you're at too. If you live in a Cascade in the middle of, 30 miles away from everything, we have like
that's an interesting point.
We have like 3 places you can actually get food at in Cascade, 3 or 4 places. That's it. So if you're not getting food somewhere else and bringing it back, got
to plan a little.
You have to plan a little bit, So I think, you're probably more inclined to do more cooking there, more meal prep in there, than if you're down here in Cedar Rapids, where it's like, hey, how many Grub Hubs can if I pulled out my phone right now, I probably could pull up 40 Grub Hubs right now, or Uber Eats or something like that. I can get anything I want, where people don't see that, or people just see that convenience. Hey, I don't have to think about it because I can just go do on my phone and it's there, versus, okay, I actually have to spend, a little bit of time to plan something out, to maybe go to the grocery store, maybe get some stuff at home, maybe spend a day of doing meal prep, a couple hours doing meal prep, where,
So how much?
According to U.S. Foods, Americans eat out at restaurants 3 times a month on average. They also order takeout or delivery 4.5 times a month. But studies also link eating out frequently with poor food choices and overeating.
Yeah. So, for those you didn't hear, 3 times a month. I think that's low.
I think that's
like
way low.
Eating at a restaurant 3 times a month, getting takeout 4 times a month.
I think the takeout thing's probably a lot lower, especially if you're talking about like Chicago.
I agree with
New
you.
York.
Yep.
LA or any city that has, because I mean, how many people at the gym that we know that drive for Grubhub or drive for Uber Eats? There's a ton of people that drive for that at the gym. So I mean, they're making money.
My question to you would be, I'm curious how much you think that some of this is also ease.
Yeah.
And God, I hate to sound like this guy, but the breakdown of the family unit. And what I mean by that is, you're right. It's 2 hours once once a week to put these meal packs together. Guess what? Me and my wife do that as a team.
Yep.
We cut everything up together. We sit in the kitchen. We put on a podcast or some music. So yeah, I always wonder how much of the migration towards constant fast food or easy options is kind of a mixture of like, well, it's easy and I'm lazy. And again, back to the family thing, how many people have been taught to cook?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll go on a semi-rambling thing here. Not sorry about that. But, growing up, I have an older brother and a younger sister, so I'm a middle child. My parents were very good at whatever we were in. I was obviously in wrestling and did sports. My brother did sports for a while, then he got a job, and my sister was into dance. Like they were very dedicated on whatever we were in, and allowed us to kind of pursue that as much or as little as we wanted, and so our times as a family weren't really there because we were, one of us was at practice, or someone was going here, or someone was doing this, or someone, so we never really had a ton of like, hey, let's all sit down at the table for dinner, no fault to it. It's just how our schedule was.
But it wasn't part of the culture.
No.
I mean, there wasn't a lack of relationship within the family that led to that, correct?
No, it was just everyone got into their thing and everyone went head first into their thing. And we were so committed to what we were doing at that point in time. This is just what happened out of it. And, I have 2 kids. My wife works, I work.
Sure. Life happens.
Yeah. But, one thing that, my wife and I are big on is sitting at the table as a family, eating meals as a family when we have the time. And granted, it's not easy. Sometimes because of scheduling, we're eating later, or, someone's not eating, or someone's doing this or someone's doing that. But we definitely try, try to make the effort of sitting everyone down at the table and eating together. One of the big things I wanted was have a big family kitchen table. So like when people came over,
do.
and I do,
Yeah.
you know, so when people come over, we can have those meals where everyone sits down, everyone's, you know, talking to each other, you know, no phones at the table. That's my wife's rule, you know, so we sit down and we talk to each other, and being able to do that and give my kids that, even though we are busy and sometimes we don't get that all the time, but when we do get that, you know, the once to twice, maybe 3 times a week is huge, you know.
And that was my point. The lack of it isn't demonstrative or emblematic of culture of the family. It's just availability.
It's just availability, and it's just being able to be. And I think part of it too is making the time to do it. You know, we make the time to cook the food, to sit down at the table, and sometimes it's something really quick, and we're all sitting down and eat really
pasta.
quick. And, yeah, pasta.
Hey, forget about it.
You know, but being able to sit down and you know, talk to my kids. How was your day at school? What did you do? You know, what's going on? And being able to have conversations. I think it's, to me, and also to my wife, that's important to us. You know, it's important to us to instill that into our children, and let them see this is okay to do. You know, and granted, they also see, hey, you have practice till like 6, 7 o'clock at night. Okay, you got to eat really quick, and you got to take a shower, and you got to go to bed, and blah, blah, blah. And that happens, you know, especially as my kids are getting older. They're all now getting into activities. And
as a cop, your schedule, not always, you know, it's not a 9 to 5 necessarily.
Absolutely, you know, and so like part of the week I'm not there, you know, for that meal time. But that's why it's important for me, those days that I am there and we have the opportunities, we take that time to do that stuff.
Watching over the last 5 years, the way that your family interacts, the things that you do with your family, the way you treat your wife and kids, the values that you have. Me and Sabrina had a really long talk about if something happened to both of us, who the godparents would be, who we would want to take our kid. Yeah, and that's why I ended up with you.
Well, I appreciate that. That means a lot.
Yeah, for real, man. Like, you know, we know a lot of people. I know a lot of people that I've known a lot longer.
Yeah.
But there aren't a whole lot of people that both of us respect the way we do you and your family.
Well, thank you.
And I mean, I plan on stealing a lot of shit the way you raise your kids. You know, the way we do ours. It's so the one thing it's funny because I've done a ton of research on this, but prior to the research, again, I feel smart. Prior to the research, this is how I felt. Turns out one of the bigger issues today is you have overly permissive helicopter parents, which is the worst. At least like the Gen Xers, if your parents didn't give a shit, you just went out and did whatever you want. You know what I mean? Yeah. Now, though, you have parents that allow your children to do whatever they want with no real rules or consequences or ramifications, but you're there hovering the entire time.
Yeah.
Talk about like the most stress-inducing situation possible. And I had always kind of thought that the way to raise a kid would be the way that you guys do it. And the more research...
We try. There's no playbook out there for that. It's kind of a lot of, hey, I think this is going to work. Let's try this.
Just trial and error.
No, it's one of those things that, you know, definitely my wife and I are on the same page on, and you know, we talk about how we want our kids to be when they're out in the world. When other people are around our children, what do we want them to see our children as, or how our children interact with their kids or interact with the world? Because, you know, that's a direct reflection on us and what and the values we're trying to instill in them. And, you know, one of the things we say to our kids is, you know, I'm not here to be your friend, I'm here to be your parent. I'm here to teach you those skills, so when I'm not there, you have those skills, you know. And I fall back a lot on my parents. You know, I love my parents. My parents were awesome. You know, I grew up, you know, my dad's probably one of the hardest workers I've ever known in my entire life. Like, there's legendary stories of my dad on these mills and projects working 20-something hours, you know, 23 hours a day, just bringing a cot in his office and just sitting there and working. And we would go to these places, and I'd hear these stories, and it's like, okay, cool, like, yeah, whatever, you know. And it wasn't until I got older.
I'm about to say, hits different as an adult.
It definitely hit different as an adult, and understanding how his work ethic, like his position in his company and his status that other people see him as, is okay. I understand why they see that, and I understand his work ethic, and you know, I'm glad that he helped instill that work ethic in me, and I can now instill that in my, you know, my son and my daughter, and hope they understand, you know, the hard work does pay off, you know. But then my mom was a super involved mom. She did, you know, PTA and all this stuff, and you know, she's city council and all that stuff. But you know, it's not the opposite, but it was more the fact that she, you know, she taught us how to voice our opinions for ourselves, and look at options, and being able to stand up for yourselves and stand up for the right things, you know.
So is it fair to say, would you say that your parents taught you how to think, not what to think?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, they
I think that's a lost art
Yes.
in today's education, you know, system, zeitgeist.
You know, one of the fun things, like I like politics. I enjoy following politics as entertainment,
like a sport.
Yeah, as
Yeah,
entertainment.
you and I are the same with
you
that.
know,
It's like theater.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You know, like national politics. It's fun to talk about national politics and local politics and stuff like that. You know, and growing up, my dad was a Democrat. My mom was a Republican.
Really?
No, sorry. My mom was the Democrat. My dad was the Republican.
That makes more sense,
Yeah.
but still,
They had conversations around us. So we were able to see, you know, a conservative side and a liberal side talking about stuff.
How'd your mom feel about losing all? No, I'm kidding.
No.
Okay, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
But we were able to grow up with that. And I don't know about my brother or sister if they took as much away from it as I did, but it was like being able to see that, yes, you're a Republican, yes, you're a Democrat, but you can have the conversation, and you can have two different opinions, but you can still have a conversation about it. And you can still at the end of the conversation have two different opinions, but you're still a family. Your goals are together. You know, your family goal is to raise your kids and make them so they're in a better situation than you were, and yada yada yada. But you can still have a personal different opinion about, you know, maybe a political opinion than someone else. You know, and I know.
Do you think that's harder to do now? Do you think that's? And I mean, I guess I'm operating under the premise that the divisions between the two parties is much more delineated than it once was, or at least accepting somebody else's opinion seems to be a little bit more out of vogue than it once was.
I think the art of conversation is gone, and it's hard for people to have conversations. I know, and I mean, kind of going back to, I'll come back to this, but the reason I think this is watching kids today. You know, I see kids around my son that, you know, they can't look at people and talk to them. It's uncomfortable for them to make eye contact and have conversations, or have long, in-depth conversations. You know, and that's even with my son. It's like, okay, let's have a conversation, and it's like trying to pull teeth sometimes to have a conversation with him.
How's school?
Yeah, good.
Fine.
Yeah, you know, but it's like trying to pull teeth, trying to teach him through that art of having that conversation with him. You can talk to people and have a conversation with someone and really develop that relationship, and still have a different opinion, or still think differently, but having that connection with someone for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, a minute, whatever it is, but being able to talk to someone, look at them in the eye and have a conversation with them. And I think that's, you know, when we talk about political parties and stuff, I think that art of being able to talk to people, sit down, hey, let's have a conversation about a possibly controversial issue. Okay, I may have a different opinion than you. I may believe in different stuff than you, but I'm going to listen to what you're going to say.
It's funny. We regularly do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I know my opinions and your opinions are somewhat similar most of the time.
Our ideologies and the way we lean tend to align. How we view those smaller issues within that sphere definitely tend to differ.
Yeah, and I think we can have a lot of conversations about stuff, and you know, I listen to you, you listen to me, and sometimes I may change my opinion because I'm listening to you.
Yeah.
And, you know, and
yeah,
it's
you've changed my mind more than once. You have a real tendency, not always a lot, but sometimes a lot more information on a topic, or know it a little more in depth than I do, and that matters as far as. Hold on one. So what happened?